Jacobs Educator Program is sponsored by the Barbara B. Jacobs Chair in Education and Technology at Indiana University, Bloomington. It builds on the efforts of Professor Thomas Brush in starting the Jacobs Educator Program. We thank the Jacobs family for their generous support of this program over the years. The purpose of the program is to recognize and celebrate K-12 teachers who are innovators in using technology. But more than that, these teachers are particularly special because they're also innovating in their pedagogy. They're teaching using problem-based and inquiry learning approaches in their classrooms. Over the years, we have had 31 Jacobs Educators. The Jacobs Educators are a national group with teachers who are local from Bloomington, Indiana and throughout the Midwest, as well as distant from the East Coast and all the way out to Hawaii. The teachers who receive these awards are invited to campus at Indiana University, Bloomington to spend a few days with us for a recognition dinner and to participate in panels with graduate students and pre-service teachers. As part of this time, they help inspire these teachers and graduate students as they learn about the awardees' best practices and begin to learn how to think about bridging research, theory, and practice. The core and the most challenging activity during the visit is writing a research to practice brief. For this activity, each teacher is paired with one researcher. The teacher and the researcher work together for a whole day as they aim to take a research article and transform it into something that is practical for teachers. The goal of creating this is to help make research findings accessible. It also helps IU researchers understand more about the concerns of the classroom.
I want teachers to really gain from this. And I mean, this is a piece of it. Understanding the difference between when they're looking at like just the mechanisms versus when they're looking at like the actual human-centered piece. But do we need to use these terms or not? I understand this, but I think as teachers, we just want to get right to the piece. So that was something I was like, maybe we can, like you just said, the systems thinking, the larger human connections versus just the actual technical components.
I would be teaching in my methods class, and I'd be talking about inquiry and these types of ideas. But then when I asked them to create lessons, what I was seeing was just the best lecture, the best PowerPoint presentation, and I was like, I'm sort of confused because I'm sort of telling them like the answer to the test, but when they design these lessons, they're going right back to this, what's the best way for me to just deliver content? And finally, after about 2 years of having that course, it dawned on me that one of the key features was they had not ever seen that type of learning themselves.
Or experienced it.
One thing that was a little bit surprising is how we both had the same views on failure. We had both had the same views on how students should interact with failure, how educators should interact with students that experience failure.
I feel like a lot of Lena's ideas that she was able to explain to me from her research, I had experienced in the classroom, and even though our work can sometimes seem very different, it really is hand in hand. So a lot of the problems that you were describing were problems that I experienced, and we were able to think of research-based ideas to solve some of those problems, and that was really encouraging to me.
So it's like, I wouldn't say like, I don't know if it's more surprise or a good thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like, okay, this work that I do, for one thing, it always comes as a surprise when the teacher says, hey, that makes sense.
I think that maybe maintaining the integrity of the research assignment as it was written is challenging to put that into a lens that could be adapted for any teacher. This one's very specific to a content area, and so making those practices that they implemented available to a broader audience has been kind of our biggest discussion point today.
Yeah, so it I guess we can say it has been challenging and that part, but that's what we really want to accomplish through this
Oh, absolutely for me with the teaching. As Andy and I have talked more, the robotics is an area I personally felt was more exclusively in the coding and the programming and wouldn't reach all of my student interests. So I've kind of let robotics be just for students with their personal passions. But her work on looking at the human-centered nature has shown me a way that makes it very creationary, where multiple students could have roles within that in the design process and find a way to connect with robotics that'll be personal to them.
I feel like just being more explicit about teaching, troubleshooting strategies to my students while we are, doing a STEM or making activity. I think, as a teacher, I try to provide them with strategies, but to teach it explicitly is something that I'm going to do from now on.
Yes, and I think we're headed in this direction with the research already, but this sort of reaffirmed some research trajectories we have related to this, both in getting into classrooms and doing more of this basic research to find out what's happening with kids, but also in doing some focus on professional development with educators to sort of give them some training in some of these practices, and then of course evaluating if the suggestions that we've made actually are impactful in changing the trajectory. So.
There have been times in my practice where I've done a lot of transcription of my classroom, I've videotaped and I've looked at it, and recently I've been working on other things, and just seeing what the short transcriptions in the paper that we're working with in the research brought up for me make me really want to reinvest myself, even if it's only for short spans, in looking carefully at the dialogue that's happening in my classroom.
Be patient, and don't feel like you have to have all the answers right away. Go into it with an open mind and be willing to make some mistakes and go back and fix it.
I think a lot of times when I read research, it's difficult to see the findings and think of practical implications for something in my classroom if it's not exactly the experiment or the research focus. But if we're able to find research practices and transfer it to lots of different situations, I think that's really beneficial for teachers. So trying to almost generalize findings so they can be applied to lots of different content areas or skills that we're teaching or strategies, I think that's really beneficial for teachers.
I think we didn't realize what being a Jacobs Educator meant until today. I mean, you get an understanding and you read someone else's work product, but until you're paired and you're actually working, you really don't understand the magnitude and the potential of releasing a research to practice brief can have. So I think maybe I would like to speak to him more, and we could have started this yesterday.
I mean, really this whole time has been very inspirational, seeing what's going on, and probably the best part is just the conversations that are happening with researchers, with fellow teachers, and what technology challenges they're seeing and how they've been able to overcome them in their own districts. So for me, it's all about the conversations, the connections, the networking, and finding a forum to continue these conversations, connecting past Jacobs educators with us so that we can, all find that group, the inspirational group that'll keep moving you forward in your goals.